work in the fastest industry on earth. When I joined Nansen, I put in 3 HR systems in 3 months.
Wow.
If we're paying somebody above market for where they
Yes.
live, it's only fair to expect top performance.
Creating a strong company culture in a fully remote kind of setting is not the easiest thing to do.
Whether a data engineer is passing data in New Delhi or New York, it doesn't matter. They're doing the same work. Let me state unequivocally that I do not believe in tracking Big Brother type technology.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Scaling Today, the podcast where we explore how companies scale and also the future of work as well. I'm your host, Yuying, and today we have a very exciting episode lined up for you. Our guest today is Joanna Yeoh. She is the VP of People at Nansen. So Nansen, I'm sure many of you who are in the blockchain industry would have heard of before. It is a very well-known blockchain analytics platform, right? I've actually known Joanna for more than 10 years by now. We were initially introduced by my husband, Bernard, while both of them were working at SingPost. Since then, Joanna has moved on to senior HR and also talent positions at companies such as Mercer, Connect One, before ending up at Nansen. So Nansen is a fully remote company. So I'm very excited to actually dive into their unique approach towards remote work and also how Joanna has enabled it as well. Welcome to the show, Joanna. Would you like to say a few words to our audience?
Sure. Thanks, Yuying. It's a real delight to be here and honored to be one of your first guests, and even more excited to be able to share Nansen and what we do, right? Maybe a quick introduction about myself. I've spent the last 30 years doing strategic HR and talent management, mostly in organizations that are either going through very intense transformation or hyper growth, right? So I've worked both in corporates with the likes of, AMD, Shell and SingPost, as you've mentioned. I've also been in consulting, right, with Mercer and PwC. So I think the best of both worlds, seeing the consulting frameworks and then being able to implement them in practice, in real practice, has actually helped me in this new role at Nansen.
I do recall that SingPost was undergoing a transformation at the time that you joined, and you really helped that process along, right?
Yes, that was a really exciting transformation, taking it from a postal practice to e-commerce logistics.
Okay, I heard a lot about from Bernard about that actually. So, Joanna, a question for you, because I do know that Nansen is fully remote. I think one of the rare companies in Singapore that is fully remote. So presumably you actually went from an in-office setup to a fully remote setup. How did you actually see the benefits in this approach, right? Were there any benefits? Were there any pros and cons that you saw?
Okay, so let me first maybe correct. We didn't start in person. Nansen was born in the midst of the pandemic. So
Right.
we were fully remote by default and also
Okay.
by design, right?
Okay.
In fact, our founders at that point in time were based in Singapore, Norway, and Thailand. And
Wow,
we
very different
built
time
out the
zones.
company. Exactly. We built out the
Okay.
company, and they built up the company and only really met in person 2.5 years later.
Did they know each other before that?
Yes, they knew. Well, two of them
Okay.
knew each other, and then they were interconnected by Alex Spanovic, our one of our co-founders.
I see. Well, that required a lot of trust for sure. So
Yes,
fully remote by default because of the way that the founders were, in different countries, right?
that's right.
Okay. And did you see any benefits to the distributed approach?
Absolutely. I think currently, let me just state that we have 80 people
Okay.
across 28 countries at the last count,
Okay.
right? And what has really worked for us is, it gave us instant access to a global talent pool,
Right.
right? And that has really, especially in an area like blockchain and crypto, where there is talent scarcity, it helps to be able to go out to the world and to be able to source talent from wherever, right?
Okay. I have noticed that a lot of blockchains and crypto companies are actually very remote, right? So I guess that's for the reason that you mentioned. It's
That's
just
right.
to get hold of talents wherever they are. Got it. And, being a fully remote company must come with a lot of challenges as well, right? So what are some of the challenges that you face with a distributed team while growing your company? And how have you overcome them?
So let me answer this firstly from a very strategic HR perspective,
Sure.
which is my background, right?
Mm.
I think the two main things, at least logistically, right, that we always need to balance, right, within building our HR for a remote company. Firstly, is the hardware piece, right? And then the second is the hardware piece.
So one is HARD and the other one is HEART.
HEART. So the
Okay.
hardware piece, in the hardware piece, you're striving for, compliance, right? You need to make sure that the employment contracts are in place, payroll is in place, you onboard people safely,
Yeah.
you give them access to systems and security and things like that. The hardware to get the work done, to get them, the feet on the ground so they can, run quickly.
Sure.
And then the hardware piece is also important because you're thinking about how do you engage people when they're spread across 3 time zones, right? How do you get them to work together? How do you get them to perform at a very high level, right? So these are all basic, questions that it has HR has thought about time immemorial, but there is an added layer of complexity and challenge, which is also very exciting, by the way, and which is why I even took this job at Nansen, was the opportunity, right, to actually build out new tools and practices that have worked very, very well for us. So maybe I can share 2 with you.
Please
they are
do.
actually
Yes.
interlinked, right? So one is something called the universal salary scale, and that how we link it to performance, right? So what exactly is the universal salary scale? It's actually the gold standard for a lot of remote companies, but I think Nansen is one of the very, very few who actually have it in practice. Now, what that means is we are location agnostic. We pay people for the work that they do and not based on where they are located, right?
I see.
So,
Okay.
for example, whether a data engineer is passing data in New Delhi or New York, it doesn't matter. They're doing the same work, so they should be paid on the same scale. So that is what we do. We use Singapore benchmarks as the scale, right?
Okay,
so
interesting.
that has helped us tremendously to hire, really top talent, especially from developing countries around Asia and also Eastern Europe, right?
I can imagine because I would say the salary difference between someone in India versus someone in Singapore, it could be 3 times, right? So this person would be earning easily 3 times of the salary he could otherwise earn by working for an Indian company. So
That's right.
definitely, if I'm the Indian engineer, I would be jumping at the chance.
Exactly. So we find that works for us. And, it's created, we are in an industry that is, fair and equitable and transparent, right? So that's what, allows that fairness,
Right.
allows our team to actually just put in all their effort. They know that they're being the person who is doing work together with them and pulling, rowing in the same direction and working as hard as them is paid the same, right? So that actually helps, right?
Okay.
With the whole, bonding and the gelling and the fairness piece, right? So if we're paying somebody, above market for where they live, then it's only fair to expect top performance.
From everyone, regardless of which country they're in.
Yes. So we actually have performance check-ins twice a year, right?
Okay.
But being fully remote, it is impossible to expect, feedback to only come from the manager because people are spread over and they work with everybody all over the world, right?
For sure.
So what we do is we start by collecting network feedback, right? The organizational
from within just the team or
organizational
from adjacent teams as well?
So basically anyone can give anyone feedback at Nansen.
Wow.
Right? And I'll tell you how we do this, right?
Please do.
We use a system called Confirm. It's based on the science of organizational network analysis. And we start by asking 4 questions. Very simple. Number 1, who energizes you and excites you at work, right? and you can name anyone inside or outside your team. 2, who have you gone to for advice when you need to complete a piece of work, right? Then again, you can name anyone, right? Now, these 2 questions alone very quickly throws up a dashboard behind that I can see, which tells me who the key influencers at Nansen are.
Interesting.
Right?
But I would
Because they have
assume
the
it would be the
influence score.
extroverts, right? It would be
And
more the
that's where Confirm
extroverts.
has actually done research, and
Okay.
they've actually told us that actually it surfaces the introverts, because
Okay. Yeah.
now while extroverts tend to like to talk to a big audience, introverts still communicate, but they prefer communicating one-to-one or in smaller groups.
I see.
So
All
when
right.
they also add value to a conversation or a piece of work, they also get surfaced as an influencer, right? Because they've helped somebody, but in a one-to-one setting. So that actually surfaces, right? Both introverts and extroverts, right? So those are the first 2 questions. Then we have another 2 questions. One, here are 3 gold stars. Who would you give it to, who has contributed to Nansen and why? And again, you can name anybody, right? So they name the people. And then conversely, here are 3 red flags, right? Who have you worked with where there's some friction or blockers that you'd like to flag? So now let me stress that we do not use this information in a punitive manner. I don't go out and punish people for it,
It
right?
doesn't affect their performance bonus or something.
What it does is I use it to surface the signal of where there are issues across Nansen.
I see.
Because it's remote, it can come from anywhere. So when that signal is surfaced, I then can dive in together with the managers to unblock it, right? To unravel it. So, and sometimes, very often, it's just a simple misunderstanding that we can correct. And then everybody course corrects, kiss, make up, and then move on, right?
And I would assume that's quite common because you have 28 countries, right? So you have different people of different cultures, different genders, different ages. So misunderstanding could be quite common.
And I think the cultural angle is one, but sometimes simply, depending on where they sit in the organization and time zones, practically, they may not get the information that they need, and therefore that information gap creates misunderstanding and misperceptions.
Okay.
Right? It's just so sometimes if you just fill that information gap, they go like, I didn't know this already existed, and you already have done it. Let's give me what you have, send me the link, I'll work on it, and let's move on, right? So sometimes that happens. So I think these 2 taken together, the universal salary scale, where fairly pay people, and that make sure that our performance is always, top notch, actually allows us to create a very high level of talent density. I was just looking at Glassdoor actually before this meeting, and one of the things you will see is that our people tell us that they enjoy working. A-team players like working with A-team players, right?
That is very true. Yes.
Competence, very high level of competence, and just being able to get the work done.
Okay, well, that's good to know, Joanna. I mean, definitely, I think that a lot of things to learn there. Like, this is the first time I've actually heard of, a kind of application like that. I think we definitely need to get the link to the application and place it in the show notes as well. All right. And, another question that I have really wanted to ask you is about creating a company culture, right? So I have felt personally at SFL that because we're fully remote as well, that creating a strong company culture in a fully remote kind of setting is not the easiest thing to do, right? I mean, when everyone is going into office, you can feed off each other's energy and you sort of know what the culture is like. But it's very different for a kind of remote company. People tend to bring the culture that they had in their previous company across as well. So how do you keep everyone connected and aligned with the values that Nansen has?
So I'm glad you brought up values, because that really is the foundation of building a culture, right? And here's where I credit Alex Vanovic, our founder, because when he started Nansen, he was very intentional. So together with the rest of the founders, they sat down and thought, what are the 4 values,
Okay.
that are, going to be the foundation of Nansen, immutable. And whatever we do, we don't move from this, right? And the 4 values they built out were transparency, right? Speed, courage, and curiosity, right?
Okay.
And these are very natural as part of our DNA being in the crypto industry, right? So they're not just words on a page. We strive every day to live them out in the way we work, in our policies, in our processes. And I'll give you some examples, right? So for transparency, anybody who joins Nansen from day one has access to what our revenue numbers are, right? On our
Wow, that's
live
amazing.
dashboards. Yeah,
That's
on our
amazing.
live dashboards on Metabase, right?
Okay.
You can see it from day one. And I can tell you, sometimes I've been directors in companies, I don't even know what the revenue is until the end of the year, let alone daily numbers. So, but transparency brings with it inherent challenges, right? When times are good, yay, we celebrate and we give shout outs. But when times are bad, we have to figure out how to motivate
Maintain
people,
morale.
pull them together, right? And, kind of redirect the negative energy into something positive, and then move forward, right? Just grit your teeth and move forward. But I think our people appreciate that transparency, so we can pull together. So for speed, for example, as well, right? We work in the fastest industry on earth, the crypto industry, right?
Yes.
Where tokens, can go from 1 million to 100 million in 48 hours.
Yeah.
So we
Billions
have to
can be made in a day.
Yeah, we have to respond very quickly. So likewise, even for me, right? When I joined Nansen, I put in 3 HR systems in 3 months.
Wow.
I've never
Is
done
this
that
very
before in
different
my
from your
career.
speed, in the previous companies you were in?
If you know corporates, right, it probably takes 3 years to put in one system.
That's
Right?
true. Yeah, I don't think things get done in months.
Yes, exactly. So and it was all simultaneously because we were scaling, right, from 50 to 300. I needed the systems to run the operations, efficiently globally, right? So very quickly we put in 3 HR systems in 3 months, right? And then courage, and courage means doing things differently, in the non-acceptable way. I mean, how many companies do you know put in a universal salary scale, right? From day one, from my earliest days as a HR practitioner, I've always been told you pay by location because of cost of living, right? But when my founder and my CEO tells me, look, I want to be equitable, we want to pay everybody the same because they're doing the same work. I'm like, okay, I got to figure out a way to make it work. And then you have the courage to swim against the tide, because all the other payroll people come to me and going like, how can you do this? What? Didn't we teach you better?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you were talking to recruiters, they'll be like, why would you do that?
Even compensation specialists, right? Who are my peers in industry, they are mind blown that we are doing this. Right? Because you lose that wage arbitrage. But we're like, fine, the wage arbitrage doesn't matter as much to us than having a team that can work together because they're all paid fairly.
But it might also, thinking of it the other way around, right? It might also lose you talent from higher wage countries,
correct,
such as the US, or maybe the UK, or even within here in Singapore.
So
as well.
the whole point of this is it's our strategic choice, right? And the reason it all came out is because when we were looking at benchmarks and trying to build our team in 2022, at that point, there weren't very many Web2 talent. Where people were going for tech talent was the Valley, right? But when I looked at Valley salaries, I said to Alex, this is going to burn our runway very quickly.
Is it even higher than here in Singapore?
Yes,
the salaries in the Valley.
So if let's say you index San Francisco at 100, Singapore sits at about 70%.
Wow! Oh my goodness! This is
Singapore
for
is already
Web3 talent.
High. Yeah, this is for tech talent overall, right?
Okay, I see.
So that's why that means we've actually deliberately. So when Alex and I discussed, we decided we are definitely then not going to compete in the Valley. right? So we then could turn away all the US type of US tech talent, because then, and we can focus on Asians and European talent, and we have had tremendous success, right? Hiring in this space using the Singapore benchmarks.
So even for with Singapore benchmarks, would European talents also be attracted to that salary range as well?
Yes,
So it's
because
competitive.
because European talent is still less than the benchmarks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting and good to know. It is a practice I hope to introduce into Isabel one day. All right. And I do have another question for you, Joanna, because you're managing about 80 people spread across 28 different countries, right? I have spoken to clients before. They have mentioned to me, their interests in things like tracking apps, timekeeping apps to know whether their people are productive. But I'm sure you have another method for maintaining productivity, a high level of productivity in your people. So are there any tips or advice that you can give us over here?
Let me state unequivocally that I do not believe in tracking Big Brother type technology.
I would expect so, yes.
Yeah. So at Nansen, we believe in measuring output, not input. Right? Just because somebody sits at their computer from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day and shakes their mouse doesn't mean they're highly productive. At least
I have seen mouse shaking apparatus on Amazon before. You can buy one for $20.
Yeah. So that's not the way we operate, right? We measure output. So like I said, the performance process, right, where your peers and your network actually credits you for doing work. And then we also have shout out channels. That's what I think works better, right? In terms of acknowledging people's output. Right. So that's what we measure.
An adjacent question to this, Joanna, out of interest, do you also train your managers in terms of how to manage remote team members? Because a lot of managers, they do tend to have experience managing by sight rather than through output, right? It is a challenge that we face within my own company as well.
Yeah. I think we don't run as much training, but like I said, because Nansen was remote by design, we've already built in systems that already are remote friendly or remote first, right? So for example, right, in communication, we have two types of communication, right? So one, you have the synchronous and the asynchronous, and then it's also time bound, right? So or the type of messages. So if let's say we need a synchronous and quick response to a question, people know to go to Slack. And we actually have channels that are created specifically to address questions in a particular, on a particular topic, right? Or a project. So people immediately, if they're online, will respond. And it can be from any team, right? It doesn't have to be just within their team, right? So that's the importance of transparency and open channels as well. Everybody has access to every channel at Nansen, public channel. Right, so you can just dive in and ask, right?
So and even if you're not from the product channel and you're from sales, you can actually go in to see what people are saying.
I have access to all the engineering channels, even though I don't understand their gobbledygook. But sometimes when they ask a people question, I can then dive in straight away and give an answer.
Okay, got it.
Related question. So that's the Slack channel. But the second thing that we do as well, we ensure that everything is written down. Right, and we use Notion for that. So there are also standards, right? So every time you want to say, hey, let's have let's do this. So for example, this morning somebody asked me, hey, when are you doing your manager masterminds, which is our training? Can I come in and do some finance training to help people set budgets and drive the bottom line, right? So I'm like, yeah, perfect. So instead of going to and fro, right, communicating, I said, look, can you put here's the example, the template from the last mastermind. Can you put together an agenda or something similar in terms of the topic? Then we arrange a meeting to discuss something that's already written down, right? So our people are already used to working that way.
Okay. Yeah.
right?
I mean,
So they're trained.
we've implemented similar things as well. I think that written communication and also by default having people who are able to write well, right,
Yes,
and communicate well in English is also extremely important at our company as well. So good to know that there's a best practice for us to follow.
yes.
Okay, so Joanna, on and offboarding remote team members, I think especially between 28 countries can be very challenging, right? So what's your process for actually bringing on new team members, and how do you handle IT equipment and support, and by extension of that as well, team members who are offboarding in another country?
Okay, so I think this is under the purview of our operations team, and they
Mhm,
work very closely with the people team to onboard and offboard, people from Nansen. So
mhm,
that's the systems are actually quite important. So we have an onboarding checklist which
mhm,
lives on our HR system, Bamboo HR. So the
mhm,
moment somebody joins, right, it triggers the checklist,
mhm,
and 3 days before an individual joins, they will get that checklist, and they go through it, and we make sure that they get access to all the systems. In
mhm,
terms of the laptops, we are actually very pragmatic.
mhm,
We get them to purchase the laptop ahead of time.
mhm.
We give them the specs. Usually it's a Mac, and
Okay.
then they purchase it. And the moment they join Nansen, this also gives them the impetus, right, to sign up for all the Expensify and systems we have, because they have to
Because
go
they
and
need to
get
expense it.
reimbursement. Yes. They need to get reimbursement
Okay.
for
Yes.
all the outlay that they've done, right? And we make
Mm.
sure that they get paid on their in the first paycheck, right?
Okay.
So they're
Okay.
not out of pocket.
Got it. And
Yeah.
by extension, for people who happen to offboard, right? Like,
Yes.
how do you handle the IT equipments for them?
So IT equipment, so firstly, we ensure that kanji, which is a security system, is installed in all the laptops
Hmm.
that our people have, right? For
Yes.
security reasons. Right. So we usually offer two modes, right? One is usually people are very attached to laptops because they've used it for a long time, right?
Hmm.
So now if they want to purchase it, we agree that we use kanji to wipe out and do a factory reset,
Okay.
and then they
Yep.
can keep the laptop, and then they pay us the what do you call it, the
The
residual,
difference.
the residual value on our accounting books, right?
Hmm.
But if they don't want it, then basically they mail it back to us from wherever they are. Or sometimes in some countries there are customs issues, you're not allowed to do that. Then we mail it to somebody else in that country, and then
Hmm.
when we have our retreats, our in-person meetings, they'll
Hmm.
bring it back in for us.
I see. Okay. Understood on your processes for that. And, Joanna, one of the questions which I really wanted to ask you, we previously had conversations on this as well, is that within SFL, so within our own company, we've noticed that some employees tend to thrive more in a kind of fully remote work setting, but, some of them don't, right? So is there a specific type of employee in your experience that you think is more well suited towards remote work?
So we found that firstly, we identified several characteristics of people who thrive at Nansen,
Hmm.
right? You know, you can see it on our actually on if you look at my LinkedIn, we wrote Alex wrote seven characteristics,
Hmm.
getting shit done, being open to feedback, so the
Yes.
whole list of it.
Hmm.
Um, that's one thing, the characteristics part of it.
Mm.
And then we recently looked at turnover as well, and we looked at the demographics, right,
Mm.
of
So the
the
age, the gender, the
yeah,
culture,
age, the gender,
country.
the
Okay.
countries. And this is also what we noticed, right? We
Hmm.
noticed that the people who tend to thrive at Nansen
Hmm.
are experienced professionals who
Hmm.
already have a high level of functional mastery,
Mm.
right?
Could you explain a bit more? Yeah,
Okay.
about that.
So that means like me, I've spent 30 years in HR, right?
Hmm.
When I come into Nansen, I know how to do HR from day one. I know how to set up
Mm.
payroll. I need to know process payroll. I don't
Mm.
need to be taught. I don't need
To be
I'm
trained.
trained. I don't need to run around like a headless chicken looking for direction, right? Because I've done it, right? So similarly, right, when we hire an engineer who's 15 years, he knows how to set up the architecture. We hire somebody who's in cybersecurity, they know how to do security, right? They so we found, and because we're remote, right, you need people who have that level of mastery and also are fully autonomous and have high agency. That means if they see a problem, they will dive in and fix it. They're not waiting for instructions, right? Like
Okay.
I said, we work in a highly very fast changing industry, and if anything goes wrong, it needs to be fixed within minutes, right? So that's why we've actually, when we analyzed and we talked to Alex, and as a team, we decided, you know what? So we just recently, just in the last 2 months, we've evolved a Nansen strategy 2.0, and we've decided that we are actually going to target more senior experienced professionals who have that functional mastery, who are autonomous, so that we
I
can
see.
pull them together into a SWAT team to fix a problem if we need to, or then we can disband and then let them go and do their individual thing autonomously and at a very high quality and high performance.
So how many years of experience would you say,
I don't
these
think
kind of
it's based on
professionals have?
years of experience, to be absolutely honest.
Mhm.
I think it's based on that high agency and people who have demonstrated that they can deliver, right? So we don't measure it by, I mean, years of experience is one way to look at it, but we also have very junior in the sense of the 2-3 years experience community managers, but who know how to manage discords, know how to engage the community because they've done it before, and they bring that mastery in to actually manage the Nansen Alpha community for us, right?
I
So if
mean,
you have high agency, you do work and you can get it done, yes. So that's what we found, right? To work better, because we find that, fresh graduates, we did have quite a large number, right, of fresh graduates in the first 2-3 years. It worked well, we brought them in as interns and everything, but it requires very, very high touch. And we realized, after a while, that we are simply not equipped to keep that up. Right,
Okay.
because you need a lot of involvement from managers. You need a structured curriculum.
What's an
They want to
apprenticeship,
know
right?
where they are, where they need to know where they're going to climb next, and they're like, okay, we're an 80-man team in the fastest industry in Earth.
A more a Gen Z kind
If
of
you
like
actually
mindset.
want that, right?
Yes.
Maybe Nansen is not the right place for you. You should go somewhere where
Okay.
there is a structured curriculum
Training program.
and training
Yes.
program and the resources for you to grow in that way, right? So I think we've had to be very honest and say that we're not the best company to join if you are
If you
intern or
need
fresh.
a lot of support.
Yeah, if you need
Yes.
a lot of support and guidance, if you're willing to be autonomous, you can get things done on your own with minimal guidance, then please, I'll send you the career link. Right?
I've noticed the same thing as you, Joanna. I mean, for us internally, it doesn't really matter on years of experience. We have had some junior people who I think they were doing a lot of things in universities, right? Like extracurricular things where they were organizing events and things for other people. And those people tend to do very well. As you said, I think it's really about agency, how much ownership they take over their own learning and over their own career growth as well.
That's
Okay,
right.
so Joanna, I'll be interested to know, I know that you're at the forefront of like a lot of development around remote work, right? So looking ahead, what do you think remote work looks like for your company? Are there any recent trends, any developments or any tools that you're really excited about?
Because of I post quite a lot about remote work and the new type of HR practices that I champion, and I often get inquiries about whether I'm interested in a job, for example, a position. And number one, no, I'm not. I'm perfectly happy at Nansen, right? But more importantly is that I am never, ever going back into an in-person office where I have to get up, get dressed, commute to work, and then sit there the whole day, whether I have work or not, right?
Until the boss
then
leaves.
at the end of the day, go home until the boss leaves, and then I leave. I am never going back there, right? And I can tell you, and tell you why I would never go. And this is also maybe I'll share something personal, right?
Sure.
I think there is a belief out there, right, that this digital nomad world is for sexy singletons who can go and work on a beach in Bali, right? But for people like me, in our 50s, we also have caregiving responsibility, right? For example, my mother is aged, right, and she needs help at home, and it helps for me to be able to work from home, right, but at the same time have a meaningful career. And if you think about in Singapore, right, where we have an aging demographic, right, it makes perfect sense to use remote work as a way of enabling, right, people to work longer, but still be able to take care of their personal lives, right? So I think from a demographic point of view, remote work is actually going to help. At least in Singapore. And I think, the second piece is technology is only going to get better and faster.
Yes.
Right? And technology is going to be a big enabler of remote work as well. Right? And I think if anything else, that the pandemic has taught us that it's absolutely possible. Right.
It was a sea change. Yes.
Exactly. It's absolutely possible. And I am grateful at Nansen, right, that Alex really was very thoughtful about, intentionally building out a remote company from the start. So we have the architecture and the infrastructure to support. I think when we don't, when companies are trying to bring in the architecture and the culture from their in-person work into the remote world without without thinking through it carefully, right? Then I think that's where all the clashes and the problems happen, because they're bringing in norms and thinking, and the whole mental paradigms, right, are from that in-office world, in-person world.
Okay, now fully agree with you on that, Joanna. I mean, for us as well, we do see, a lot of, I think it's more of a change of management mindset that is actually required for remote work to take off successfully. So I fully agree with you. If the company is one that is not transparent, not explicit with its requirements, and judges more by time input rather than work output, it's really one that hasn't reached the kind of level that would make remote work for it. So, Joanna, thank you so much for joining us today and, for sharing your valuable insights. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from this session, is really about exactly what we said at the last part, where the founder or the CEO has to be very intentional in setting down the direction for the company towards remote work, and also enacting, right, the whole infrastructure, processes, the values, and the culture that is needed to make that successful as well. So thank you so much for sharing that with our audience. All right. Where can our listeners find you, Joanna? Are you on Twitter?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where I live, because I'm in charge of recruitment for Nansen. So that's where
very necessary.
That's where my employer branding sits, right?
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay.
That's right. So you can find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. So good to have you here today.